Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to our live YouTube classes. This is our third and final session for our International Relations based Current Affairs revision course. We have quite a few interesting topics lined up for tonight. So let's get started with the 32nd question that was left behind in our yesterday's discussion. The terms call for action and non-cooperative countries or territories is associated with which organization? Is it associated with World Bank or IMF or the FATF or the UN Security Council? The correct answer is option C. These terms are associated with the FATF, which stands for the Financial Action Task Force. The terms call for action and NCCT, it refers to the black list of the FATF. To understand why this topic is relevant, let us move to the next slide. See, FATF and its blacklist and grey list are frequently in news because Pakistan has been placed on the grey list of the FATF. The grey list of the FATF is also referred to as the other monitored jurisdictions. And right now, Pakistan is facing the threat of being listed on the blacklist of the FATF. And this blacklist is also referred to as call for action, and countries present on this list, they are categorized as non-cooperative countries or non-cooperative territories. So let us understand this topic a little more in detail. Let us understand what is the FATF, what is its mandate, and what is the grey list and the blacklist of the FATF. All these topics can be very, very important for your prelims examination. See, the FATF or the Financial Action Task Force was established in 1989 during the G7 summit. Please note this down. It was the G7 which established the FATF in 1989. What is the objective of this organization? The primary objective of this organization, when it was established back in 1989, was to tackle money laundering. This was the only objective of the FATF back in 1989. But after the 9/11 attacks, which took place on this day 19 years ago, right? After the 9/11 attacks, the mandate of FATF was revised because it established the links that existed between money laundering, organized crime, and terror financing. The link that existed between money laundering, organized crime, and terror financing was exposed through the 9/11 attacks. So after this, the mandate of the FATF was expanded to cover terror financing or terrorist financing as well. So in 2001, the FATF's mandate was expanded, and since then, this is the primary international organization that tackles not just money laundering, but also terror financing. This is the primary mandate of this organization. How does the FATF do this? It achieves its objectives by laying down standards. The global standards are brought out for countering money laundering and terror financing. And all the countries, the member countries and the others, they are expected to match up to these global standards. They have to pass relevant domestic legislations which is in line with the FATF standards and ensure that they enforce these laws very strictly. They basically have to prove to the FATF that their national laws against money laundering and terror financing are up to the global standards that are brought out by the FATF. So the FATF carries out a review once in a while. All the countries and the jurisdictions, they are reviewed once in a while by the FATF to check whether the national laws of each and every country is in line with the FATF standards. It tries to check whether those countries are enforcing these laws as mandated by the FATF. If there is any shortcoming, if there are any loopholes in the implementation, or if there is a deliberate intention on the part of a government to promote money laundering and terror financing, then the FATF will start taking action. The first step that the FATF initiates is to list the country on its grey list. The country would be classified as other monitored jurisdictions, and it would be placed on the FATF's grey list. This basically means that that particular country or that particular jurisdiction is having certain loopholes when it comes to combating money laundering and terror financing. It means that the country is lagging behind and there are certain deficiencies which need to be addressed. So getting grey listed by the FATF is more like a warning. It is a warning that is given to the country, and after being grey listed, the FATF will provide for an action plan. And this action plan has to be implemented by the country within a certain given deadline. Okay? Following the review process, if there are any deficiencies, lack of enforcement, and if there are any loopholes, the country could be placed on the grey list. Once it is placed on the grey list, it serves as a warning. An action plan is given by the FATF, and this action plan has to be implemented by that country within the given deadline. If these guidelines are not followed, and if that country fails to implement the action plan, then it faces the risk of being placed on the black list of FATF. Once it is blacklisted, it will be declared as a non-cooperative country or a non-cooperative territory. So what will happen because of this? It's very important to understand that. It's very important to understand the consequences of being blacklisted by the FATF. Okay? Please note down these 5 points that I've given over here. All of them are very important for your prelims. If a country is blacklisted by the FATF, then it faces the risk of being faced with economic sanctions by global financial institutions. Global institutions such as the World Bank, the IMF, and the Asian Development Bank, they could impose economic sanctions against that country which has been blacklisted. Once economic sanctions are placed, it will become difficult for that country to obtain funding, to obtain financing from these institutions. It won't be able to access international funding. It won't be able to carry out trade with other countries because other governments and foreign companies will find it difficult to trade with a country that has been blacklisted by the FATF. Right? So the sanctions imposed by FATF and by the global financial mechanism can actually cripple that country's economy. So there would be a severe economic cost if a country is blacklisted. Then upon this, there would be an international boycott or economic boycott on that country, and the flow of capital investments would also be affected. You will not be able to receive fresh capital investments. This will severely affect the creation of infrastructure. So this is the consequence of being blacklisted by the FATF, and Pakistan is currently facing this risk. Why? Because Pakistan has not lived up to the expectations laid out by the FATF. There have been severe shortcomings in its laws against money laundering and terror financing. It's an open secret that Pakistan shelters a variety of terror groups such as the Lashkar, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Hizbul Mujahideen, etc. The leaders, the top leaders of these terror outfits, they are allowed to freely roam in Pakistan, raise funds for their organizations, and even move the money freely in order to carry out their acts of terrorism. The FATF expects Pakistan to strengthen its money laundering mechanisms and its laws against terror financing. But unfortunately, Pakistan has not done this over the years. And in fact, between 2012 and 2015, Pakistan was already placed on the grey list once. For 3 years, Pakistan was already on the grey list. Because the FATF's expectation is that these top leaders, such as Hafiz Saeed, Zakir Rahman Lakwi, and Masood Azhar, the top leaders of these terror groups, right? FATF expects that Pakistan acts against them. FATF wants Pakistan to freeze their accounts, to deny them access to weapons, and place a travel ban on them. But Pakistan has done none of this. And even if some of them are arrested, right, under international pressure, it tends to release them after some time on very unsubstantiated grounds. There have been a number of cases where even convicted terrorists have been released by Pakistan on unjustifiable grounds. And some of them who have been arrested, they have been arrested for other violations, such as disruption of public order. They have never been arrested under anti-terrorism laws. So there are several shortcomings in Pakistan's anti-terror approach, especially when it comes to money laundering and terror financing. And this is exactly what FATF is concerned about. So recently in 2018, the FATF again placed Pakistan on the grey list. This happened because of the efforts of India, United States and other like-minded countries. In fact, India has made it a top priority to target Pakistan at the FATF for its role in sponsoring terrorism against India. India is working with close friends and like-minded countries such as the US and France and other countries to gain support at the FATF so that Pakistan could be targeted and it could be placed on the blacklist as well. Right now, India is trying to lobby with other countries to build up evidence against Pakistan and show that Pakistan is not serious about tackling money laundering and terror financing. So this is a part of India's coercive diplomacy against Pakistan. It is an Indian strategy to exert diplomatic pressure on Pakistan so that Pakistan can face the economic consequences of sponsoring terror groups, that too against India. Okay, so that's the reason why this topic is so important. You can definitely expect questions on these various aspects of the FATF. Now let's move on to the next question. With which country has India established a dedicated air corridor for trade and freight movement? The correct answer is option A, Afghanistan. With Afghanistan, India has created a dedicated air corridor. So let's understand what is an air corridor, why is it important, why is it in news? See, India established a dedicated air corridor with Afghanistan back in 2018. This was established because trade between India and Afghanistan is severely affected. Why? Because we don't have direct land-based connectivity. Because between India and Afghanistan, you have Pakistan, which does not provide transit access to India. So as a result, the export and import of goods between India and Afghanistan gets affected. So India worked out a bypass for this. It invested in the Chabahar port. I'll be showing you the maps again. We tried to access Afghanistan through Iran. But again, this is a very long and circuitous route. Such a long route is suitable for non-perishable products and commodities. But how about agricultural products, food items, fruits? Because these are perishable commodities and you need to transport them as quickly as possible because they are perishable items. So in order to facilitate this trade, India and Afghanistan established an air corridor through which special cargo flights are run and the cargo is cleared at a very fast rate. The customs clearance is given very quickly so that there is no delay in the logistics in transporting these items, these perishable items from Afghanistan to India and from India to Afghanistan. So over the last 2 years, this air corridor has been functioning pretty well. It has improved trade between India and Afghanistan. It helps Afghanistan generate precious revenue. It helps stabilize the country and it brings India-Afghanistan even closer. But this topic is back in news because India recently considered a proposal to establish similar air corridors with Central Asian countries. Because see, India has very good relations with all the 5 Central Asian countries, be it Kazakhstan, be it Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, or Turkmenistan or Kyrgyzstan. With all the 5 Central Asian countries, India has excellent diplomatic relations. And these Central Asian countries are blessed with plenty of resources. They have several precious minerals, metals, they even have uranium, they have hydropower, right? So these countries are blessed with precious resources and we have fantastic diplomatic relations with them. So India plans to exploit these resources, and for this, India is trying to access the Central Asian countries via Iran and via Afghanistan. Right? On the very first day, we spoke about the Chabahar port project and how it helps India establish connectivity not just with Iran and Afghanistan, but also with the Central Asian countries. But again, the problem is this route takes a lot of time. It is good for non-perishable products, but otherwise perishable items, they face the risk of getting spoiled, and hence India is considering a proposal to establish an air corridor between India and the 5 Central Asian countries. Because if an air corridor is set up similar to the one that we have with Afghanistan, then perishable items can be brought to India in just a couple of hours from Central Asian countries. Otherwise, the land route and the sea route, they take anywhere between 30 to 40 days. In some cases, it takes nearly 2 months to send goods between India and Central Asian countries. So to overcome this logistical challenge, it has been proposed to establish a dedicated air corridor with the 5 Central Asian countries as well. Okay? This is apart from the connectivity project that we are working on. See, in 2016, India, Iran and Afghanistan, they had signed a trilateral agreement. Through this trilateral agreement, India was planning to develop the strategic Chabahar port in Iran. It is located over here. And from the Chabahar port, India and Iran were planning to construct a road and rail network to connect with Zahedan, which is a border town in Iran. India and Iran were supposed to jointly develop this road and rail network from the Chabahar port to Zahedan, which is a border town on the Iran-Afghanistan border. Why Zahedan? Because just across the border in Afghanistan, India has already built a road. India has already funded the construction of a road between Zaranj and Delaram. This orange stretch of road you can see over here in Afghanistan has already been built with Indian assistance. This Indian built road connects with the Garland Road of Afghanistan that connects with 4 prominent cities of Afghanistan, that is Herat, Kandahar, Kabul, Mazar-e-Sharif. These are also the cities where India has consulates, and in Kabul we also have an embassy. Right? So India has a very strong diplomatic presence as well. So India wants to capitalize on this close relations with Afghanistan, and we want to bypass the obstacle posed by Pakistan, because Pakistan is not allowing us access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, and there is no other route for India to reach out to these countries. So India came up with a strategy to work with Iran and Afghanistan to create this alternative connectivity route, and from here India plans to reach out to the Central Asian countries. But like I said, this route, this sea and land-based route, is good for non-perishable products. It is good for bringing minerals such as uranium and other precious metals and resources. But it is not suited for perishable items. It is a long and time-consuming route. So for this, we need a shorter route such as a dedicated air corridor through which perishable items can be traded between India and Central Asia in just a couple of hours. So that's why the topic was in news, and that's the reason why you should be aware of all these connectivity projects that India is looking at as far as reaching out to Afghanistan and Central Asia is concerned. And there's another reason why I'm talking about the Chabahar project again, because see, recently Iran has said that India will not be involved in the construction of this rail network from the Chabahar port to Zahedan. This came as a shock to India. Iran has blamed India for delaying the project, and there is also reason to believe that Iran might be doing this at China's insistence, because China is a close ally of Iran, and of late China is looking at making massive investments in Iran. Because see, I'm sure you know that Iranian economy is suffering right now because of the American economic sanctions. So China is looking at helping out Iran by bringing in billions of dollars in investments. So China, which is looking to invest such huge money in Iran, is probably looking at cutting out Indian influence. So recently Iran made a statement that India would be excluded from this railway project because India has delayed the project. But later some clarifications have been issued by both India and Iran, but still we don't have much clarity on this. It's still a developing issue. But however, please remember that these connectivity projects have been frequently in news, and hence you can expect a prelims question, either on the Chabahar port, the Zaranj-Delaram road, the air corridor between India-Afghanistan, the proposed air corridors between India-Central Asia, right? All of this could be a possible prelims question for you. Now let's take up another question which is related to the same topic that we are discussing. Identify the correct route of the Tapi gas pipeline. Okay, in the options, a list of cities has been given out. So you need to identify which could be the possible correct route that would be taken by the Tapi gas pipeline. So how do you answer such questions? See, to answer this question, you should know that the TAPI project involves Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. If you're aware of this and if you're aware of basic geography, you should be able to crack this question very easily. See, look at option A and option C. Option A contains cities such as Tehran. It contains Tashkent. Obviously, option A and C has to be incorrect because Tehran is in Iran and Tashkent is the capital of Uzbekistan. So you can easily rule out these options. Then also look at the gas fields mentioned over here. The Farsad B gas field is again located in Iran. The Sakhalin gas field mentioned in option C is located in Russia, in the Far East Siberian region of Russia, right? So obviously option B has to be the right answer. The TAPI pipeline includes Turkmenistan and the project proposes to extract natural gas from the Galyanish gas field, and from here a pipeline is being built to Herat and Kandahar, two major cities in Afghanistan. From here the pipeline will enter Pakistan to connect with Quetta and Multan, and then it will reach Fazilka, which is a border town in the Indian state of Punjab. So this is the proposed gas pipeline. The construction is already progressing. Okay. See, this is where the Galyanish gas field is located right next to the Daulatabad gas field in Turkmenistan. This is one of the largest gas fields in the world. From here, the pipeline will reach Afghanistan. It will pass through Herat, Kandahar, enter the Balochistan province of Pakistan, that is Quetta, reach Multan and then reach Fazilka, that is a border town in India, that is in the state of Punjab. Okay, this is the proposed project. The construction has already begun in Turkmenistan and in Afghanistan. The project is yet to progress on the Indian and Pakistani side. This project is quite critical for the region. It is expected to bring economic development to Afghanistan. That's the reason why even the United States is backing this project. The US has given complete support for this project because it believes that if the project is completed, it will bring revenue to Afghanistan and help in socio-economic development. And that should probably help in stabilizing the country which has been affected by civil war, right? But however, India does have a few concerns about the TAPI project. Even though we are actively involved in the project, India does have some serious concerns because the route of the project, right? If you look at the route, it passes through very volatile regions, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. See, this belt, the southern parts of Afghanistan, the western and the eastern parts of Afghanistan, they are the strongholds of Taliban outfits. The Taliban and its factions, they have a very strong presence across this belt. So this project could be probably targeted by such terrorist outfits. Within the Taliban, you have a faction known as the Haqqani network. The Haqqani network is one of the factions of the Taliban which has frequently targeted Indian projects and Indian nationals and even Indian officials who are working in Afghanistan. The Haqqani network has carried out attacks against the Indian embassy, against the Indian consulates, against Indian projects and Indian engineers. So repeatedly, the Haqqani network has attacked Indian interests in Afghanistan. Why? Because the Haqqani network is seen as a proxy of Pakistan's ISI. So India has this legitimate concern. Then the project passes through Quetta and Multan, again a very volatile region. You have plenty of anti-India terror outfits operating over here, starting right from Lashkar to Jaish. All these outfits have a presence. Then India is also concerned about the kind of relations we have with Pakistan. What if Pakistan cuts off the pipeline when tensions increase between India and Pakistan? So this is again a legitimate concern that India has. But apart from these concerns, India is willing to go ahead and give this project a chance because it will help India connect with Central Asia. It has both strategic and economic significance, right? So this is another project you should be aware of. And also note that the funding for this project is being provided by the Asian Development Bank, ADB. Another possible prelims fact. the Asian Development Bank is funding the Tapi pipeline primarily because the United States is backing this project. ADB was able to fund this project because the United States has given complete support to the project, and the US holds one of the highest voting rights at the ADB, and this helped in ADB to fund and finance this project, which involves these 4 countries. Now let's move on to the next question and take up a related topic. Which country holds the highest shareholding at the Asian Development Bank? Is it China, Japan, United States, or both Japan and United States? The correct answer is option D. Both Japan and US, they hold the highest shareholding and the highest voting rights at the Asian Development Bank. Right? So this could be a possible question. Then you can also expect a factual question on the ADB itself, because ADB is a very important financial institution. It's frequently in news. It is funding a number of projects in India. It is funding a number of projects in which India is involved in, such as the Tapi project. So as a result, there could be a static question, a fact-based question on the ADB. So let's quickly talk about the Asian Development Bank. It was established in 1966 and it is headquartered in Philippines. It is headquartered in Manila in Philippines. The main objective of the ADB is to fund development projects, especially in the Asia and Asia Pacific region. The primary focus of ADB is to fund development projects in Asia and as well as in the Asia Pacific region. Who are the members of this bank? The members are from the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. The UN has an economic grouping, a social economic grouping for the Asia Pacific region. The members of this UN group are members of the ADB as well. They are eligible for membership at the ADB. But apart from these countries from the Asia Pacific region, there are a few non-regional members as well. There are a few countries that are not located in Asia Pacific, but still they are members of the ADB. Okay, there are European countries, then you have countries such as Australia, then you have United States. So even these non-regional countries are members of the ADB. So please note this down. At the ADB, you have a total of 68 shareholding members, and out of them, 49 are developing and developed countries from the Asia Pacific region, and 19 countries are from outside of the region. They are non-regional members. And the governance structure of ADB is quite similar to that of the World Bank. At the World Bank, voting rights is given to the member countries based on the shareholding that they have, based on the capital that they have invested in that bank. So the same structure is followed over here as well. Based on the capital that they hold, based on the shares that they hold in that bank, voting rights are also given to those countries. So please be aware of the shareholding as well. It's very important. Japan and United States, they both hold the largest proportion of the shares at the ADB. They roughly hold around 15.57%, and this gives them the largest voting rights. After Japan and US, we have China with a voting share of 6.42%. Then at the 4th position, we have India with a voting share of 6.31%. These are the top 4 shareholding countries at the ADB, so please remember that. Moving on to the 36th question, which of the following statements are correct? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project is being built on the Congo River. It has emerged as a source of dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt. It is said to be Africa's biggest hydropower project. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect. Why? Because the GERD project is being built on the Nile River. To be more specific, it is being built on the Blue Nile, not on the Congo River. Is that clear? But however, this project has become a source of dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt, and if it is completed, once it is completed, it is all said to be Africa's largest hydropower project. So as a result, the correct answer would be option C, 2 and 3 only. So let us talk a little more about this project, that is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project. This project is coming up in Ethiopia. You can see that in the map over here. It is being built on the Nile River. Like I said, it is being built on the Blue Nile River. See, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, they merge to form the Nile. And this has become a dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt. Okay? And in this dispute, even Sudan, which lies in between them, gets caught in the conflict. Sudan, which lies in between Egypt and Ethiopia, also gets caught in the conflict. So why is Egypt concerned about this project? See, Egypt is worried that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, if it is completed and if it starts holding water, then it might affect the course and the flow of the Nile River. If this happens, Egypt could be severely affected. Why? Because the Nile River is literally the lifeline of Egypt. It depends on it for drinking water. It depends on it for irrigation. The livelihoods of farmers in Egypt is directly dependent on the waters that are available in the Nile River. Then Egypt also depends heavily on the Nile for inland navigation as well, for tourism as well. So it is a key source of revenue and sustenance of livelihoods in Egypt. So Egypt's concern is that this massive dam, which is said to be Africa's largest hydropower project, could disrupt the flow of the Nile and the availability of water in the Nile, thereby affecting livelihoods in Egypt. So that's the reason why it has become a source of diplomatic dispute. Even Sudan, which lies in between, gets caught up in the conflict. Okay? These are the major riparian states that are a part of this disputed conflict, and you should be aware of this because this topic is frequently in news. Especially in the Hindu and the Indian Express, there have been multiple articles over the last 1 year that talks about the dispute surrounding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project. So for this reason, you could expect a question on the dam, the location of the dam, the Nile River, its tributaries, and the countries through which the river passes through. Okay, these are the possible areas from which a prelims question can appear. Moving on to the 37th question. Which of the following statements are correct? The first question, the first statement, the Indian Ocean Commission or IOC is a regional grouping that is focused on the Western Indian Ocean. The second statement says that India was recently inducted as an observer to the organization. Both the statements are correct. Option C is the right answer. Is that clear? The Indian Ocean Commission or IOC, it is a regional grouping that is focused upon the Western Indian Ocean. And India has been recently admitted as an observer to this important organization. Let me show you a map which will help you understand the significance of this grouping and the significance of India gaining the observer status at the Indian Ocean Commission. See, the Indian Ocean Commission is a regional grouping of the Indian Ocean, and it is primarily focused on the western part of the Indian Ocean, or also referred to as the African Indian Ocean. This grouping includes 5 member countries. All the 5 countries are small islands located right next to Africa. Okay, this includes Seychelles, Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, and French Reunion. These are the 5 member countries of the Indian Ocean Commission. All the 5 African island states, they are located in the Western Indian Ocean or in the African Indian Ocean. Please take down the members again: Comoros, Madagascar, Mauritius, Reunion, that is French Reunion, and Seychelles. French Reunion is basically an overseas territory of France, because most of these countries were erstwhile French colonies, and France still has an overseas territory over here in the Indian Ocean, that is Reunion or French Reunion. So France still has a significant naval presence as well in the Indian Ocean, and it continues to be an important player in the western parts of the Indian Ocean. So that's the reason why these 5 countries are a part of it. The grouping also has 5 observers. Please write this down as well. It's very, very important. I will explain later as to why the Indian Ocean Commission is so important for India. Okay? The observers include China, India, which has been recently admitted, the Sovereign Order of Malta, the European Union, and a grouping known as OIF. OIF is basically a collective or a grouping of 54 French-speaking nations. 54 countries which speak French, right? They have a grouping known as the OIF, and even this organization holds observer status at the Indian Ocean Commission. So let's understand why this grouping is so important for us. See, India considers the Indian Ocean Commission to be of great strategic significance. Why? Because of the location of these countries. The location where these small island countries of Africa can be found is of great significance to India. Why? Because this is where India and China are engaged in a power play, right? India is seen as a traditional power in the Indian Ocean. It has treated the Indian Ocean as its strategic backyard. Traditionally, India has been the dominant power over here. But in the last 15 to 20 years, China has been challenging India's monopoly in the Indian Ocean. Chinese naval presence has increased significantly. Then, this part of the Indian Ocean, that is near the Horn of Africa region, it is severely affected by piracy as well. Right? Near Gulf of Aden and near Horn of Africa, piracy is quite rampant. These pirates, they come from an East African country known as Somalia. Somalia is largely in a state of civil war. You don't have a stable government over there. And in Somalia, you have a radical terror outfit known as the Al-Shabaab. The Al-Shabaab largely controls the administration in Somalia. And these pirates who carry out pirate attacks against ships passing through Horn of Africa, they belong to the Al-Shabaab terror outfit. At one point, Al-Shabaab was affiliated to the Al-Qaeda. Right now, it has shifted its allegiance towards the Islamic State. Right now, it has pledged allegiance to the ideology of the Islamic State. So members of Al-Shabaab, they carry out these pirate attacks in order to extract money, in order to extract ransom after holding hostages and after holding the ship hostage. So this is one way through which Al-Shabaab generates revenue for itself, and this rampant act of piracy in and around Gulf of Aden and Horn of Africa has severely disrupted global shipping. So this again is a cause of concern for India. India's other concern is that since pirates and terror outfits are active in the region, this could pose a national security challenge as well. Since groups like Al-Shabaab are affiliated with Islamic State, previously with Al-Qaeda, there is a possibility that other anti-India outfits such as Lashkar or Jaish, there is a possibility that they may tie up with these outfits. Right? So this could be a security nightmare for India. So for this reason, India wants to have a strong naval presence, especially in and around the Western Indian Ocean region. India's first concern is the increasing presence and influence of China, because China has increased its naval deployment. It has frequently sent out its naval ships and submarines to this part of the Indian Ocean in the name of fighting piracy. To combat piracy in the region, China keeps deploying its navy just like the other countries have. Even India, Japan, US and European countries, even they have deployed their navies over here to combat piracy. And in the name of fighting piracy, China is increasing its naval presence over here, which poses a direct security challenge and a strategic threat to Indian influence in the region. Recently, China has even set up its first foreign naval base in Djibouti. Djibouti is a small African country located near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Okay, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is again a choke point. You can see that over here. It's a narrow choke point. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait is a narrow choke point that connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden. This is where you have the Suez Canal in Egypt. So this is a very important sea lane of communication. It's a critical route to connect between Europe and the Indian Ocean. It's a very important route for ships that are passing from the Mediterranean Sea through the Suez Canal into the Red Sea They pass through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, they enter the Gulf of Aden, then enter the Arabian Sea and pass into the Indian Ocean. Right from here, it connects with the Pacific Ocean as well. So this is a very important sea lane of communication. And piracy is a major threat. So foreign navies have a very strong presence over here, and the increasing naval presence of China is a cause of concern for India. So at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, you have a country known as Djibouti, where China has set up its first foreign naval base. And India sees this as a strategic threat. So for all these reasons, India wants to have greater influence in the western part of the Indian Ocean, that is, in the African part of the Indian Ocean. So this grouping, which includes these 5 island countries of the Western Indian Ocean, right? This grouping naturally acquires significance, and India becoming an observer to this organization will help India to further its diplomatic relations and defense relations with these 5 countries. Okay, that's one of the key advantages for India. Then upon this, India's entry into the Indian Ocean Commission as an observer will also help improve our naval ties with France. Why? Because like I said, French Reunion is an overseas territory of France. France also has a strong naval presence over here. It has an obligation to defend French Reunion and the former French colonies. It also tackles piracy over here. And since India-France have very close strategic and defense relations, this could be an area for collaboration and cooperation wherein both India-France can jointly tackle the rising threat of China in the western parts of the Indian Ocean. That's another advantage for India by becoming an observer to this grouping, because even France is a part of it, right? Indian Navy and the French Navy can collaborate. They can jointly ensure the security of this whole region. Then there is another advantage for India. See, this small passage you can see over here is known as the Mozambique Channel. This is known as the Mozambique Channel. Let me show you a much clearer image. So you can see over here, this is the Mozambique Channel. It's a narrow passage that passes through between Madagascar and the East African country known as Mozambique. It is located right across the Tropic of Capricorn. The channel cuts across the Tropic of Capricorn. The Mozambique Channel is again a very important sea route. It is an important sea lane of communication. Why? Because see, before the Suez Canal was built, this was the preferred route of connectivity between Europe and Asia. If you go back to this map, see, before the Suez Canal was built over here, the preferred route to connect between Europe and the Indian subcontinent was to move across the continent of Africa, pass through the Mozambique Channel over here, then reach out to the Arabian Sea and India, and further into Southeast Asia as well. But after the Suez Canal was built, the Mozambique Channel has lost its significance, because the route through Suez Canal is much shorter, it is safer, it saves time and money, so this has become the preferred shipping route. But recently, the Mozambique Channel is again gaining prominence. Why? Because one, piracy is very rampant over here, and the Strait of Hormuz over here near the Persian Gulf has become very volatile. Why? Because of increasing tensions between US and Iran, because of constant conflicts and war-like scenarios in the Persian Gulf and in and around the Gulf region. So shipping through this region is quite volatile, and this places a lot of pressure on the Suez Canal route. Especially in the last 1 year, tensions have increased between US and Iran in and around the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and as well as near the Gulf of Aden. So for this reason, the Mozambique Channel route has again gained significance. It provides a much safer route, even though it is longer and more expensive. Okay? Plus, the Mozambique Channel also holds a lot of hydrocarbon reserves. It is known to have a large reserve of hydrocarbons. So this is again something that India could jointly exploit with friendly countries like Madagascar, Seychelles, Mauritius, and of course French Reunion, right? So these are the various factors which makes India's observer status at the Indian Ocean Commission so significant. Okay, all these points have been listed out over here. Then, of course, don't forget the Sagar Doctrine that we spoke about yesterday. Yesterday we discussed the Sagar Doctrine of the Modi government. It basically reflects our strategy towards the Indian Ocean region. This is the foreign policy national security doctrine that India is pursuing towards the IOR region. Under the Sagar Doctrine, India is trying to ensure security and growth for all in the region. India is trying to provide for security and growth for all in the region. It is trying to establish itself as the net security provider. So that's the reason why India's entry into the Indian Ocean Commission is so important. It will help us further project our Sagar Doctrine. India already has very close relations with Maldives, Mauritius, and all the other Indian Ocean countries. We have close ties with Madagascar as well, with Seychelles as well. So India becoming an observer to this group will only help us further the Sagar Doctrine of India, and it will firmly establish India as the net security provider of the western parts of the Indian Ocean as well. Okay, so please remember all these points. They could be asked as a prelims question. Now moving on to the 38th question. In which country is ISIS Khorasan or ISIS-K known to operate? Is it operating in Syria or in Iraq or in Yemen or in Afghanistan? See, ISIS or the Islamic State is also known as ISIL. It is also known by the name Daesh. These are the different names that are used to refer to this terror organization. Its primary objective is to establish an Islamic caliphate, right? Its ideology is very different from that of Al-Qaeda and the other terror groups. It is not just interested in carrying out acts of terrorism. It is interested in establishing the Islamic caliphate. So the ISIS and its ideology has found a lot of appeal in many parts around the world. In fact, ISIS has a number of branches or affiliated outfits around the world. The main outfit of ISIS, which operates in Syria and Iraq, is referred to as ISIL or ISIS or Daesh, because it stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. The Levant region is a geographical term. It refers to areas in and around Syria and Iraq. Okay? This is where ISIS was born. This is where the ideology took birth. But this outfit, this parent outfit operating near the Levant region, near the Syria-Iraq region, it has a number of sister organizations. It has a number of affiliated organizations. Okay? Basically, it has branches around the world. It has a branch in Libya. It has a branch in Yemen. It also has a branch in Afghanistan. This Afghanistan branch of Islamic State is known as ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. The objective of this outfit is to establish an Islamic caliphate over here in areas around Afghanistan, Pakistan and Iran, and they refer to it as the Khorasan province or the Khorasan region. That's why this branch of ISIS in Afghanistan is known as ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. But the point is, why are we talking about this organization? How is it relevant for us? See, ISIS Khorasan has started gaining prominence of late. It is quite frequently in news because it is threatening India's interests in the region. How? Please look at this map. This map explains how territorial control has been established in Afghanistan by two radical outfits, that is Taliban and ISIS or ISIL. See, in Afghanistan, Taliban is the most prominent outfit. There is no doubt about it. Okay? Taliban has majority control over western parts and southern and even eastern parts of Afghanistan. Except for a few pockets in the north, most of the other areas in Afghanistan is firmly under the control of the Taliban. That's the reason why the Afghan civilian government is not strong enough. It is because of this reason the United States had to negotiate with the Taliban, because the Taliban had clearly made a resurgence. It controlled majority of the territory. More than 65 to 70% of Afghan territory is under the hold of Taliban. So this directly weakens the legitimacy of the civilian government. So if United States had to pull back its troops, and if it had to work out a face-saving exit from this long drawn-out war, the only option for the United States was to negotiate with the Taliban. So that's exactly what they have done over the last few months, and they have finalized a US-Taliban peace deal, right? So this is one topic which is quite frequently in news. The peace deal has been worked out, and currently intra-Afghan talks are supposed to take place. That is, the Taliban has been mandated to talk to other outfits in Afghanistan, including the civilian government, and work out a power sharing agreement. Basically, they have to decide the future of political structure in Afghanistan. See, before we talk about ISIS, Khorasan and the other topics, let me give out a few brief details about the US-Taliban peace deal as well. It might be relevant for prelims. See, as a part of the US-Taliban peace deal, United States has agreed to pull back American troops. A timeline has been drawn out, and by the end of it, all American troops will be taken back. See, this was a top priority for the Trump administration because American involvement in Afghanistan has become highly unpopular back in the United States. Because this long war has resulted in the killing of thousands of American soldiers. It's been a long drawn-out conflict. The US has clearly lost on its strategic objectives, right? Even though it succeeded in toppling the Taliban initially after the 9/11 attacks, but over the last 19 years, Taliban has made a resurgence. As you can see in this map, today it controls majority of the areas, and the US has clearly lost the conflict. So the Trump administration and even the Obama administration, they were looking for a face-saving exit so that they can take their troops back home and end the Afghan war, giving Taliban control back in Afghanistan. Right? That was the objective. So under the peace deal, Americans have agreed to pull back the troops in a given timeline. But in return, Taliban has promised to ensure that Afghan soil is not used to carry out attacks against Western targets. This is something they have committed to under the peace deal. Then under the peace deal itself, all the parties have agreed to exchange the prisoners and hostages. The US government has agreed to release all the Taliban prisoners held captive in US and in other centers around the world. The Afghan civilian government has been forced by the US to release all the Taliban prisoners, and Taliban and its outfits have agreed to release all the hostages. This topic is also in news because a number of Indian hostages who were held by Taliban outfits, they are being released right now. Over the last few weeks itself, Taliban outfits have released a few Indian nationals, and there are few more Indian engineers who were abducted in Afghanistan who are still under Taliban's captivity. That's one more reason why the topic is in news, right? So under the peace deal, the US will pull back its troops. In return, Taliban will promise that the Afghan soil will not be used for terror attacks, especially against Western targets. And all the three parties, that is US, Taliban and the Afghan civilian government, they will release their prisoners and hostages. Then Taliban and other political entities, they will hold intra-Afghan talks to decide the future of Afghanistan. These are the terms that have been worked out. But in the middle of this, you have a new outfit that has established its presence in Afghanistan, that is ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. It has established itself in the eastern parts of Afghanistan. You can see that in this map over here, the black shaded regions in the eastern parts of Afghanistan is where ISIS Khorasan has established a presence for itself. Okay? And this is threatening the future of Afghanistan and as well as Indian interests in Afghanistan. Because recently, in March 2020, ISIS Khorasan carried out an attack against a Gurudwara in Kabul. It was a major attack. Basically, this attack represents the threat faced by religious minorities in Afghanistan. This topic is also important for another reason, that is the Citizenship Amendment Act, the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act of India. This controversial law passed by the Indian government seeks to provide citizenship to religious minorities from Afghanistan as well who have faced religious persecution. So the religious minorities in Afghanistan, such as the Sikh community, the Hindus over there, they have been frequently targeted by radical outfits such as the Taliban and now the Islamic State, that is ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan. So just a few months ago, ISIS-K carried out a major attack against a Gurudwara in Kabul, and India expressed its anger against this attack. So India works closely with the Afghan government and even with US and other countries to tackle this terror threat and this threat against religious minorities. So that's another reason why the topic is important. Fine. Then, just a few weeks ago, ISIS Khorasan carried out a jailbreak in Afghanistan in order to release its operatives. Just a few weeks ago, ISIS-K carried out an attack against a jail which was holding a number of prisoners who were basically terrorists, radicalized terrorists. They were released during this attack, and this strengthens the presence and the capabilities of ISIS-K in the region. Okay? India is closely watching all these developments, primarily because ISIS-K can be a threat to Indian presence in Afghanistan. It can attack the Indian embassy, the Indian consulate, Indian officials there, Indian engineers and Indian projects that are being put in place in Afghanistan. Then more importantly, there are several Indian nationals who are reportedly fighting for ISIS Khorasan in Afghanistan. Reports from IB and RAW, they show that Indian nationals who have been radicalized largely through social media, right? They are self-radicalized. They have been self-radicalized through ISIS ideology on social media platforms, and they have traveled on their own from various states of India, from Kerala, from Tamil Nadu, from parts of UP, even Maharashtra. And reportedly, quite a few Indian nationals are fighting in Afghanistan on behalf of ISIS-K. They have even taken their families along with them. So if these nationals who are fighting on behalf of ISIS-K, if they come back to India, right, and if they slip past our security measures, that could also be a major security threat. Because after coming back, they might carry out attacks in India as well. So for all these reasons, the emergence of ISIS-K in the eastern parts of Afghanistan is very important. It is a security threat for us. It is also a strategic threat because it can disrupt the ongoing peace process in Afghanistan. It can affect Indian interests in Afghanistan. So for all these reasons, we can expect a possible question on ISIS-K. Moving on to the next topic, which of the following statements are incorrect? Please notice the question is asking you to identify the incorrect statements. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, or also known as CTBT, is a multilateral treaty that bans all nuclear tests from both civilian and military purposes in all the environments. It was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1996. It has entered into force as it has received universal ratification by all the UN members. Amongst the given statements, the third statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, as the name itself suggests, it prohibits testing of nuclear weapons. Okay? It was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1996, and it prohibits all kinds of nuclear testing and in all the environments. It means that a country can't test nuclear weapons in the air, on land, underground, or undersea. Because in all these domains, nuclear weapons could be tested. A nuclear warhead can be dropped from the air and it can be made to explode in the air itself. It can be tested on land or underground, like India did. Right? At Pokhran tests, India carried out underground explosions. It can also be tested under the sea, like US and Russia have done back in the 1950s. So the CTBT Treaty of the UN, it prohibits testing of nuclear weapons in all the domains, that is in all the environments. It was adopted in 1996. So the first two statements are absolutely correct. But the third statement is incorrect because it has still not entered into force. Right now, CTBT does not have any legal authority, doesn't have a legal mandate. Why? We will talk about it. We'll understand why CTBT has still not entered into force. But before that, let's understand why CTBT is in news, why it could be important for your prelims. See, recently, just a few months back, the United States, that is the State Department of US, which is the equivalent of India's foreign ministry, it brought out a report. And through this report, it blamed China and Russia for conducting a low-yield nuclear test. This report of the US government blamed both China and Russia for conducting a low-yield nuclear test which is in direct violation of the CTBT. This was the allegation brought up by the United States. As expected, Russia and China denied these allegations. They said they haven't tested any such nuclear weapons, but US insisted that both the countries had carried out separate tests through low-yield explosions. This is what was claimed by the United States. So this is what brings CTBT into news, because US accused Russia and China of violating the CTBT. This also indicates the ongoing arms race between the three superpowers, that is US, Russia and China. There is an arms race going on between these three countries with regard to nuclear weapons, with regard to ballistic missiles, and even with regard to hypersonic missiles that we spoke about yesterday, right? So that's why this topic is so important. So in this context, let us talk about the CTBT in greater detail. Let us understand what is this treaty, what are the provisions, and what is India's stand with regard to CTBT. We need to talk about whether India has signed the CTBT. Are we a part of it? Right? So all these aspects has to be discussed. Like I mentioned, this treaty bans the testing of nuclear weapons everywhere and by everyone. All the countries have to stop testing nuclear weapons, and nuclear testing in all the domains, that is in the air, on the land, under the ground or under the sea, everything has to be stopped. So this treaty, like I said, was adopted back in 1996 and it was negotiated under the Conference on Disarmament. Please write this down. Under the UN, there is a disarmament mechanism known as CD, or Conference on Disarmament. This UN mechanism is aimed at disarming nuclear weapons and disarming the weapons of mass destruction. Okay? This organization, or this global platform, is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. So through Conference on Disarmament, countries are trying to work out a de-escalation mechanism through which nuclear weapons and other WMDs can be disarmed and wiped out from the face of the earth, because they represent an existential threat for every country and for every individual on this planet. So the main objective of CD is to carry out global disarmament. So CTBT was negotiated under this platform, and after it was finalized, it was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1996. After being adopted, it was opened for signature, and till date, around 184 countries have signed the CTBT. Okay? We roughly have around 193 states. There are 193 UN members. Out of them, 184 states have signed the CTBT and 168 have ratified it. This is the reason why the CTBT has not entered into force. Why? Because under the terms of CTBT, there is a prerequisite, there is a condition. If the treaty has to come into force and acquire legal effect, then it needs to acquire universal ratification, especially by 44 specific countries which are known to have nuclear weapons capabilities. There are 44 nations in the world which have the capabilities to build a nuclear weapon if required. Okay? But we don't have so many nuclear weapon states, but they do possess the capabilities, the technology and the raw materials that are needed to build a nuclear bomb. So one of the prerequisite under CTBT is that these 44 countries, they must and should sign and ratify the treaty for it to come into force and take effect. But this has not happened. That's the reason why CTBT has not entered into force. So let's see which countries have stayed out of it. Out of these 44 countries, 36 of them, they have signed and ratified the treaty. So this leaves us with 8 countries. There are 8 countries which are out of CTBT. See, there are countries such as China, Egypt, Iran, Israel and US. Okay, these 5 countries, they have signed the treaty but they have not ratified it. Please write this down. This can be a prelims question. These 5 countries, they have signed the CTBT but they have not ratified it for several reasons. China, Egypt, Iran, Israel and US. But there are 3 countries which have never signed the CTBT. Forget ratifying it, they have never signed it. This includes North Korea, India and Pakistan. Why haven't these countries signed it? They haven't signed the treaty, they haven't ratified it, primarily because they want to retain the option of testing nuclear weapons in the future if required. They want to develop their nuclear weapons program further, and they want to retain the option of testing nuclear weapons in the future. And this is mainly for strategic reasons. So in this context, it's very important to understand what is India's argument against joining the CTBT. India has a very strong argument over here. You need to be aware of these points that India has brought up, because this can come as a question in both prelims and mains. See, India's argument is that the CTBT is discriminatory in nature. This is one of India's key arguments. India believes that the CTBT and its provisions, they are discriminatory because it contains unequal provisions. Why? Because if you look at the terms of the treaty, it basically tries to create a divide between the official nuclear weapon states and those countries that do not possess a nuclear weapon. Basically, it is trying to create an unequal relationship between the nuclear haves and the nuclear have-nots. See, under the terms of the treaty, the P5 countries, they have been hesitant to act or to enforce a comprehensive ban on nuclear testing. This is one of the key drawbacks of the treaty. See, ideally, the treaty, if it wanted to impose a comprehensive ban on nuclear testing, then it should have focused on disarmament. It should have focused on complete and equitable disarmament around the world. It should have pushed all the nuclear weapon states to disarm at the same time in an equitable manner. But CTBT does not do that. It does not focus on disarmament at all. It is only focused on banning nuclear tests. That is the only objective. So India believes that this is discriminatory because when the treaty was brought in 1996, India was yet to test and verify its nuclear capabilities. But by that time, the P5 countries, they had already become nuclear weapon states. That is US, Russia, France, UK and China. They had tested their nuclear weapons way back in the 60s, 50s and 70s, right? So there is no further need for them to test those weapons, and hence they would continue to, have an edge when it comes to nuclear weapons. Whereas countries like India, even Pakistan and Israel, they wanted to retain the option of testing weapons and developing a nuclear program. Because when the treaty was brought in 96, India was yet to test its nuclear weapons. This is one of the reasons why India has not signed it. India probably will never sign this treaty because it is discriminatory. These P5 countries have already acquired nuclear weapons, they have tested it, and the treaty does not place any obligations in this regard. It does not push for disarmament. It does not push the P5 countries to give up their nuclear weapons, right? But if India signs on to it, let's say especially in the 90s, if India had signed on to it, India would have effectively given up on its nuclear program. Because without testing, you can't validate the capabilities of your nuclear weapons. So since P5 countries were allowed to retain their nuclear weapons, and since India would have had to give up testing, India decided never to sign this treaty because it contains unequal provisions. It does not push for disarmament. It only places an obligation on countries which are trying to test in the future. For the P5 countries, this is not a requirement, right? So that's the one reason why India decided to stay out of it. Second, the treaty contains a number of ineffective provisions. What are those ineffective provisions? See, it does not clearly define what is comprehensive ban on testing. It provides for a very vague definition. If you go through the provisions, you'll find that the definition is quite vague. And it prohibits only two types of nuclear tests. It prohibits a full-fledged nuclear explosion, and it prohibits a zero-yield test. A zero-yield test is basically a nuclear test where the explosive nuclear chain reaction is not triggered. Is that clear? CTBT prohibits two types of tests. One is a full-fledged nuclear explosion, the kind we have heard about, we have seen in pictures and videos. It also prohibits another kind of testing, that is zero-yield testing. Meaning there is no explosion that takes place, the chain reaction is not triggered, but without doing that, nuclear weapons can still be tested. So that kind of testing is prohibited. But in between these two, there is something called as low yield testing. with a very minimal yield, with a very minimal explosion, especially under the ground, nuclear weapons can still be tested, and this is not clearly covered by CTBT. This is exactly the allegation that US has brought up. US has said that Russia, China have carried out such a low yield test which bypasses the CTBT. Yes, China has no obligations because it has not ratified it, but still China has signed the CTBT just like the United States. Is it clear? So the provisions are not effective. They are not well defined. They are quite vague. So that's one reason why India feels that CTBT is not, it's not a watertight treaty or a convention which can bring nuclear equality. First of all, it has discriminatory provisions. It allows the P5 countries to retain their weapons. It does not push towards disarmament. It only prohibits countries like India from testing weapons. So one, India doesn't want to give up that option. Second, the provisions are not well defined. There are a number of loopholes which can be misused. So India is also of the opinion that the United States has been a single beneficiary of these loopholes that exist in the CTBT. Because the US has fine-tuned its nuclear program, it has already established a supremacy when it comes to nuclear weapons. So due to all these reasons, India has decided to stay out of CTBT and probably will never sign this treaty because of these reasons. Next, we should also talk about the CTBT organization. This can be important for prelims again. Under the CTBT, that is under the treaty, there is an organization known as CTBTO. What does it do? It tries to establish a verification regime or a verification program in order to monitor nuclear testing by any country. See, if the comprehensive ban on nuclear testing has to be established, then you need a verification mechanism, right? You need some sort of mechanism through which you can verify whether a country has carried out a nuclear test or not. Or else, how will you penalize that country? How will you identify that a country has carried out a nuclear test? So to identify that, you need a global verification regime or a mechanism, and this is being created by the CTBTO. Okay? It has tried to establish a global network of sensors. It has used a variety of sensors, and it has created a network of sensors around the world, especially in countries where there's a nuclear program, in order to detect any possible nuclear explosion. There are hundreds of stations around the world that the CTBTO runs, and it has also deployed a variety of technologies to detect nuclear explosions in all the environments, that is in all the domains. It has used seismic sensors to detect the shock waves that are sent across the Earth's crust when a nuclear bomb is exploded on land or under the ground, right? Because nuclear explosions on land or under the ground, they can trigger a mini earthquake. It can send out tremors, and it can be distinguished from a natural earthquake. So seismic sensors have been set up, and it is run by the CTBTO. Within the organization, there is a institution known as IMS, the International Monitoring System. It is the IMS which is responsible for setting up these monitoring stations around the world. So seismic sensors are deployed around the world to detect nuclear shock waves. Hydroacoustic sensors have been deployed in all the seas and the oceans to detect any acoustic signals of an underwater test. Infrasound sensors have also been deployed by the IMS of CTBTO to detect low frequency signals that are emitted during a nuclear explosion. Low frequency sound waves are usually emitted following a nuclear explosion. To detect them, infrasound sensors have been set up around the world. Then radionuclide sensors are also used to detect the radioactive particles and the isotopes that could be emitted after an explosion. So like this, different sensors and technologies have been used by the IMS to detect and verify any possible nuclear test by any country in the world. Okay? So it is the responsibility of the CTBTO to enforce these provisions, to provide evidence to the world that a particular country has tested nuclear weapons. For example, when North Korea tested weapons, the CTBTO picked up evidence. Through its network of sensors, it gave evidence to the world that North Korea had indeed conducted such a nuclear test. So in prelims, they can ask a basic question on CTBTO. They can ask a question on these technologies that can be used to detect a nuclear explosion. Right? So that's the reason why we have covered this topic in detail. Now, Let's move on to another topic. It's a related topic. It is connected to the CTBT. We are going to talk about the NPT or the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So this brings us to the 40th question. Which of the following statements regarding the Non-Proliferation Treaty are correct? Its objective is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology with the further goal of achieving nuclear disarmament. It also looks to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. The treaty was negotiated by the Committee on Disarmament, or also known as the Conference on Disarmament, a United Nations sponsored organization based in Geneva, Switzerland. We already know that the third statement is correct. We covered it just now. The first two statements are also correct. So option D is the right answer. So what is the NPT? The Non-Proliferation Treaty tries to prevent the proliferation or leakage or spread of nuclear technology and nuclear weapons and nuclear raw material. That's the objective of NPT. The objective is to prevent the proliferation or the spread of nuclear weapons technology. This treaty was adopted in 1968 and it came into force in 1970. Please note this down. Unlike CTBT, NPT has come into force. Is that clear? CTBT is still not in force. It has no legal mandate. Whereas the NPT has come into force. So what does the NPT do? It basically tries to define which countries are official nuclear weapon states. Okay, NPT defines few countries as official nuclear weapon states. This includes the P5 countries, the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council who had acquired nuclear weapons before the treaty was brought in. Only those countries have been recognized as official nuclear weapon states. Okay, this is one of the biggest drawbacks of this treaty, and this is one reason why India will never sign the NPT. Is that clear? Because the treaty recognizes only these 5 countries as the official nuclear weapon states. Just have a look at this provision. The treaty says that those countries which had built and tested a nuclear weapon before the 1st of January 1967, only they are recognized as nuclear weapon states. Obviously, this applies only for the P5. That's why this provision was brought in. That's why this cutoff date was chosen. So this would exclude countries like India, Pakistan and Israel, who also wanted to pursue nuclear weapons, right? So if a country signs the NPT, right, apart from the P5, all the others, they have to abide by this provision. You can see this in the third point over here. The NPT says that the non-nuclear weapon states, that is all the countries apart from the P5, they have to agree, they have to commit that they will never acquire nuclear weapons, and in return for this commitment, they will receive assistance in nuclear technology that is in the civilian domain, that is for peaceful purposes. Let me explain this again. The NPT recognizes only 5 official nuclear weapon states, that is the P5 countries. All the other countries apart from P5, they have to pledge that they will never develop nuclear weapons. Even if they have a program going on, they have to shut it down. And in return for this commitment, they will be provided with civilian nuclear technology by the P5 countries. And why would you use civilian nuclear technology? To produce nuclear power, nuclear-based electricity, or to make use of nuclear technology in the medical domain, primarily to treat cancers, right? So such civilian nuclear technology will be passed on by the P5 to the other countries, but they have to swear that they will never develop nuclear weapons. So this is a discriminatory provision. This is clearly discriminatory, and it restricts the sovereign right of a country to develop nuclear weapons for its own defense and for its own strategic reasons. Countries like India felt that this provision is clearly discriminatory. It goes against our national interests. Because at that point, in the 1960s and 70s, India felt severely threatened by China, by Pakistan, and as well as by the United States. So India decided to keep the nuclear option open, and hence India has said that it will never sign the NPT because of this discriminatory provision. See, India has always supported the cause of nuclear disarmament, but India will take it up only when disarmament is done in a fair and equitable manner, only when all the countries disarm at the same time. But since P5 countries are retaining an advantage through NPT and CTBT, India would never sign these treaties. The same stand has been taken by Pakistan as well, and even Israel has taken a similar stand. Okay, so there are 4 countries in the world, just 4 countries in the world which have not signed the NPT, and this can be a prelims question. Okay, this includes India, Israel, Pakistan and South Sudan. Why haven't they signed it? Like I said, India, Pakistan, they wanted to retain the option to develop and test nuclear weapons. Israel has done the same. Even though Israel has never tested nuclear weapons, it's an open secret, it's largely believed around the world that Israel has already developed nuclear weapons. Okay? India, Pakistan have demonstrated it. They have carried out nuclear tests and shown it to the world. Israel hasn't done that, but it is widely believed that Israel also has developed nuclear weapons. So, just like India, even Israel has not signed CTBT and as well as NPT. Israel has not ratified CTBT, whereas it has not signed NPT. The case of South Sudan is a little different. See, South Sudan has no nuclear ambitions. The reason why it hasn't signed is because it's a new country. It was formed very recently in 2011. The country of Sudan was broken up. Okay, it was partitioned and divided due to a civil war, and South Sudan was recently established as an independent country in 2011. And since then, it has been going through a civil war. So you don't have a stable government over there to discuss these issues and sign and ratify the NPT. So that's the reason why South Sudan is also out of the NPT. Okay, but 3 countries have chosen not to sign it. That is India, Israel and Pakistan. Then North Korea is another unique case. North Korea had earlier signed the NPT back in 1980s. So as per this commitment, North Korea was supposed to shut down its nuclear program. It was not supposed to develop nuclear weapons. But later, due to geopolitical reasons, due to its conflict with South Korea, with US and Japan, it decided to test its nuclear weapons, develop the program, and it has quit the NPT. It has walked out of the NPT. Okay, this was in 2003. So this again can be a prelims question. North Korea is the only country which has signed the NPT but later withdrawn and tested nuclear weapons. In the 1980s, North Korea was a part of it. It had signed the treaty. It violated the provisions. It developed nuclear weapons, tested it, and quit the treaty in 2003. Okay? So please remember all these points. They can be important for your prelims questions. Now moving on to the 41st question. Who established the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, or ICCR? The correct answer is option A. It was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Abul Kalam Azad was India's first education minister. He was also a very prominent freedom fighter as well. So it was under his leadership that the Indian Council for Cultural Relations was established. This organization is quite frequently in news because it plays a key role in projecting India's soft power. It takes up a number of cultural initiatives, cultural programs, and through this, it is projecting India's cultural and civilizational heritage. That's why the organization can be important for prelims. So let's understand the background to this organization. It is an autonomous organization under the government of India. Okay, it's an autonomous organization and it is primarily responsible for India's external cultural relations. So it works closely with the Ministry of External Affairs and with India's embassies, high commissions and consulates abroad to promote India's cultural values and cultural heritage. See, back in those days when it was established, it didn't have much of prominence because see, the institution was set up in 1950 by Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. So back then, we didn't even have the term soft power. The concept of soft power didn't exist back then because that was the era of the Cold War and foreign relations were primarily driven by hard power, that is military power and as well as coercive economic might. So hard power was driving foreign relations. Soft power was largely ignored. But of late, especially in the last 20 to 25 years after the Cold War came to an end, soft power has gained a lot of prominence in foreign policy and international relations. Why? Because every country has realized the limitations of hard power. At any given point of time, your hard power has several limitations. Your military might, your economic might has several constraints. Just by the use of force and just by the use of coercive diplomacy, you can't achieve all your objectives. This is something that every major power has learned, be it United States, be it Russia, be it the former Soviet Union, be it the European powers, be it India and China. They have realized that hard power such as military power and coercive diplomacy, they have their limitations. So if you have to protect your national interests, if you have to further your foreign policy agenda, then you also need to combine your hard power with soft power. That includes the projection of your cultural assets, the extension of the influence of your cultural and civilizational heritage, right? So this is something India is actively working on. In the last 20 years, India has given a very high priority for projecting India's soft power through its diplomacy. So as a result, an institution like the ICCR acquires a lot of significance. It is playing a lead role in developing India's external cultural relations policy. It conducts a number of cultural exchange programs. Okay, its initiatives have expanded. It has diversified. Because see, back then soft power was not given much of priority, and hence it was focusing only on small initiatives like organizing cultural programs, funding scholarships, etc. But in the last 15 to 20 years, its portfolio has been diversified. Today it is actively projecting India's soft power in multiple countries. It is making use of India's Buddhist heritage, India's art, literature, dance forms, right? Music, Bollywood, Indian food, all these cultural aspects that are integral to the Indian society, they are being used. The Indian diaspora is being encouraged to participate in these programs. And through such initiatives, the ICCR is playing a lead role in helping out the MEA to project India's soft power. That's why the organization is important and it is frequently in news. Let's take up the next question. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which was in news, supplies natural gas between which two regions? Please take your time, go through the question and the options. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline supplies gas between which two regions? Is it between Western Europe to US and Canada through the Atlantic Ocean? Or is it between Russia to Western Europe across the Baltic Sea? Is it between Russia and China via the Siberian region? Is it between Turkey to Western Europe through the Mediterranean Sea? The correct answer is option B. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline supplies gas between Russia to Western Europe across the Baltic Sea. Please look at the map. See, this map is depicting the Nord Stream gas pipeline. Okay? This basically supplies the natural gas found in Siberia, that is the Far East region of Russia. Remember, we spoke about the Far East region of Russia in the first class. So from the Far East region of Russia, natural gas is being supplied through this pipeline. This pipeline enters the Baltic Sea, and this is considered as the longest subsea pipeline in the world. Please write this down. The Nord Stream pipeline, the first phase of the project, that is Nord Stream 1 or Nord Stream pipeline, it is considered as the world's longest subsea gas pipeline. It supplies gas between Russia and Western Europe. It brings the gas supply to Germany and from here to other West European countries. So it is Siberian natural gas found in the Far East of Russia, which is transported through this subsea pipeline. Recently, Russia has made a proposal to build the second phase of the project, the second pipeline known as Nord Stream 2. It runs parallel to the previous pipeline and it is supposed to expand Russia's export of natural gas to West European countries. So this was a strategic and as well as an economically significant project for Russia. But Russia has faced a number of hurdles, and that's the reason why this topic was in news. So you need to understand this topic in complete detail because it's very, very important and quite interesting as well. See, Russia was very much interested in building the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and supply gas to Western Europe. It wanted to expand its involvement in the supply of gas to Western Europe. But this project, which was under construction, it was threatened by American sanctions. That is the CATSA sanctions that we spoke about the other day. Right? America brought in a law known as Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. This legislation prohibits other countries from trading with countries like Russia in critical sectors like oil, natural gas and defense. So the US was looking to impose CAATSA sanctions against Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was under construction. So before the sanctions could take effect, Russia wanted to speed up the project and it wanted to complete the project ahead of the sanctions taking effect. Before American sanctions could be put in place, Russia wanted to complete it and execute the project. So when it tried to accelerate the project, it faced severe protests in Denmark. Environmental groups protested in Denmark against this project. Russia believed that this was an American strategy to delay the project. Russia believed that the United States was behind these protests in order to slow down the project and ensure that the sanctions of CAATSA will take effect and disrupt Russia's supply of gas to Western Europe. Now, why would US do this? Basically, the US was using a geopolitical tool such as CAATSA sanctions to target a commercial project. Russia's conclusion is that the US was doing this to promote its own shale oil exports to Western Europe. I hope you know that the United States is the world's largest producer of oil. It has recently become the world's largest producer of oil. Why? Because the US has plenty of shale oil reserves. So there is something called as shale gas, okay, which is extracted from the shale bed. And this is something that is unique to United States. It is quite different from the crude oil extracted by other countries in the Gulf and Latin America and in Africa. Right? Even Russia has plenty of crude oil and hydrocarbon reserves. But US has the United States has a very unique resource known as the shale oil reserves. So through this, US has become the largest producer of shale oil and it exports this in large quantity to West European countries. So the United States had a commercial interest in mind. It wanted to prevent Russian exports and replace it with American exports of shale oil in order to capture the European market. So Russia concluded that the US was deliberately using sanctions and triggering protests in order to delay and sabotage the project so that American shale oil can be later exported to West European countries. So this naturally angered Russia, and Russia retaliated by threatening America's dominance with regard to supply of oil. See, US plays a pivotal role in the global oil markets, right? And Russia openly challenged it and it successfully weakened American influence in the global oil markets. This happened in the last few months after the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. So understanding this is very important. So after the Nord Stream Gas 2 pipeline project was sabotaged by the US, Russia triggered an energy war or an oil pricing war with Saudi Arabia in order to weaken America's influence on the global oil markets. How did Russia do this? To understand that, we need to talk about the oil pricing war in detail. We need to talk about organizations such as the OPEC and the OPEC Plus. See, what happened was, by February, March, the COVID-19 pandemic had broken out. In March, it was declared as a pandemic by the WHO. And following this, countries around the world, they went into a lockdown. For weeks together, countries and economies were completely shut. So this naturally stifled the economy around the world. Vehicles were not moving around. Fossil fuels were not being consumed. Industries had been closed, right? Global shipping had come to a halt. So as a result, the demand for oil witnessed a sudden fall. In mid-March, the demand for oil and hydrocarbon-based resources witnessed a steep decline in the month of March as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, what will happen when the demand falls so suddenly? Naturally, the prices will also fall, right? Why? Because the supply is being maintained at the same level. When the supply is quite constant and when there is a sudden fall in demand, obviously the prices are also supposed to fall. So how can you address this imbalance? How can you stabilize the oil markets in such a scenario? You can stabilize it by cutting your production as well. If the demand has fallen suddenly, if you cut back your production and your supply, then you can try to stabilize the demand-supply equation and you can stabilize the oil prices. This is what should have been done ideally. And to fix global oil prices and to determine the production volume, there is an organization known as OPEC. It stands for Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Okay, under this group, the oil producing countries, they get together, they fix a limit for oil production so that there is a balance in the demand supply equation, and they also help determine the oil prices. This is how the OPEC countries led by Saudi Arabia, they have controlled the global oil markets. Okay, OPEC is primarily led by Saudi Arabia. It's the lead power over here. So in total, there are 13 countries as of today. In 2020, as of now, there are 13 countries which are a part of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And Saudi Arabia is a lead power over here. It's one of the largest producers. And these countries, okay, they use OPEC as a cartel. They use it as a cartel to determine the extent of oil production from each member. So by controlling supply, they will control the prices. This is how these countries have dominated the global oil markets. But please remember that the United States is not a member of the OPEC. Even though it has emerged as the world's largest producer right now, it has stayed out of the OPEC for several geopolitical reasons. So what happened was, when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out and when there was a lockdown, there was a sudden fall in demand, the oil prices crashed. So if the oil market had to be stabilized, the only option was for the OPEC countries to get together and decide upon production cuts. Every country had to cut their production, their supply, so that the demand supply equation could be balanced. But what did Russia do? See, Russia is not a member of OPEC. Okay? Russia is a part of OPEC plus. Later I will explain the difference between the two, but for the time being, understand that there is something called as OPEC and OPEC plus. OPEC plus is an extension of OPEC. Russia is not a member of OPEC. OPEC is led by Saudi Arabia. It includes 13 major oil producing countries, and there are 10 more countries which join the OPEC for a discussion, and this becomes the OPEC plus. So when the OPEC plus meeting was taking place, Russia decided to not take up any production cuts. Russia deliberately increased production even though there was no demand, in order to crash the oil prices. So this is what is referred to as the energy war, or the oil pricing war, that was witnessed between Russia and Saudi Arabia. Here the Russian target was not Saudi Arabia, but Russia was using Saudi Arabia and the OPEC to crash the global oil prices so that it could capture the global oil market and weaken American dominance when it comes to oil exports. This is how Russia retaliated against the US for its role in sabotaging its gas pipeline project. So this was a very interesting geopolitical event that took place over the last few months. Okay, so this is the energy pricing war that we are talking about. So Russia refused to cut production. It held on to this stand for several weeks. So if Russia refuses, obviously Saudi Arabia also refused. Why? Because if Saudi Arabia cut production, then its share in the oil market could be affected. So as Russia increased production, even Saudi Arabia kept continuing its production. So as demand was falling, the supply was maintained at the same level, or it was increased by Russia and Saudi Arabia. So as a result, the prices crashed further, and thereby it destroyed the American dominance on the oil market. Because Russia and Saudi Arabia could exploit this to their advantage. Especially Russia could exploit this and capture the global oil markets with cheaper oil. Right? And US won't be able to enjoy the same advantage. So this is how Russia retaliated against the US for its role in sabotaging the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline project. So now let's quickly talk about OPEC and OPEC plus groupings. The question is asking, what best describes the OPEC and OPEC plus groupings? Is it an intergovernmental organization that functions like a cartel to determine oil production and oil prices? Is it a regulatory body for encouraging healthy competition amongst oil producing countries? Is it a pressure group of oil producing countries in the Gulf region to establish their monopoly in the global oil market? Or is it an international organization dedicated towards maintaining stable oil supplies and for promoting environmental awareness? See, option B, C and D are clearly incorrect. It's not a regulatory body. It is not a pressure group as such. Okay. And it doesn't include just the Gulf countries. That's another reason why C is incorrect. OPEC has countries outside the Gulf region as well. Fourth one is incorrect because OPEC doesn't focus really on environmental awareness and environment protection. So this leaves us with option A. It is an intergovernmental organization. Like I said, there are 13 member countries. It functions like a cartel, and its objective is to determine oil production levels so that oil prices can be fixed. Oil prices can be fixed. Okay? See, OPEC was established in 1960 in Baghdad by 5 major oil producing nations, that is Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. This organization is headquartered in Vienna, Austria. Write down these facts. Okay, there's nothing much to discuss there. It's a very factual point, can be important for prelims. Later, the organization has been expanded. Like I said, its main objective is to determine the production level and thereby fix the global oil prices. So as of today, there are 13 countries. Until recently, there were 14 countries. But one country has recently quit the organization, that is Ecuador. Okay? Even Indonesia and Qatar have quit the organization quite recently. So please write this down. This could also be a prelims question. So let's look at the current members of OPEC. Okay, as per latest data provided by OPEC, there are 13 countries. You can see them in the map over here. This includes Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon. All these are African countries. Then you have Gulf countries and Middle Eastern countries like Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya from North Africa, Nigeria again from Africa, Republic of Congo, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Venezuela. These are the 13 countries that are part of OPEC. Okay? Recently, 3 countries have quit the organization. You should be aware of this. That is Ecuador, Indonesia and Qatar. Ecuador was the latest to quit. It quit in January 2020. Okay? And 1 year before that, I think in 2019 was when Qatar left the organization. And Indonesia left the organization in 2016. So in the last 3-4 years itself, 3 countries have quit OPEC. Fine? So please remember all these countries, can be important for prelims. So OPEC has been extended into another grouping known as OPEC Plus. This is to help the OPEC members consult with the non-OPEC countries. Because see, these are not the only 13 countries which produce oil. The OPEC members are not the only oil producers in the world. There are other countries as well which produce oil. And these non-OPEC countries, 10 of them, they also negotiate with OPEC in order to determine production levels and determine the oil prices. So when these 10 non-OPEC countries interact with the 13 members of OPEC, we refer to that grouping or that interaction as OPEC Plus. Is that clear? So OPEC Plus has 23 countries altogether, 13 members from OPEC, which are major oil producing and exporting countries, and 10 other non-OPEC members, which includes Russia as well. US is not a part of both. US is not there in OPEC, it's not there in OPEC Plus as well. So these are the key points that you will have to remember in order to answer any question on this topic. Now, we are nearing the end of the session. We have small topics left, largely factual topics. Let's quickly wrap them up. Okay, the 44th question. Operation Sanjeevani, which was recently seen in news, refers to, option B is the right answer. It refers to an emergency airlift of essential medicines and hospital consumables to Maldives by the Indian Air Force during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, that is the correct answer. Operation Sanjeevani was the code name given for this operation, wherein the Indian Air Force airlifted essential medicines and hospital supplies to Maldives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, yesterday, if you remember, we spoke about a transport aircraft that we have acquired from US, the C-130J Super Hercules. It's a military transport aircraft which gives India heavy lift capabilities. So using this, India has helped out Maldives during the lockdown because Maldives was facing a shortage of essential medicines during the COVID-19 lockdown. So India airlifted these essential medical supplies and transported it to Maldives under Operation Sanjeevani. Then also focus on option A, C and D. Even they refer to important operations that India has run in its neighborhood in the recent past. This could also be a possible prelims question. Okay, I have dealt with this in the next slide. Option A refers to Operation Insaniyat that India carried out in 2017. Under this mission, India provided HADR assistance to Bangladesh when it was dealing with the huge influx of Rohingya refugees. If you remember, yesterday we spoke about the Rohingya crisis in detail. So when Bangladesh received a sudden influx of lakhs of Rohingya refugees in 2017, right, Bangladesh was not able to deal with this crisis. So India helped out Bangladesh under Operation Insaniyat by providing essential supplies which could help out the refugee population. Then we already spoke about option B, that is Operation Sanjeevani. That was the question. The third option, that is option C, refers to Operation Sunrise that India carried out in 2019. This was more of a military operation. It was basically a joint counter-insurgency operation carried out by India and Myanmar to target the northeast insurgent outfits that are operating along the India-Myanmar border. Along the India-Myanmar border, there are several northeast insurgent outfits that operate, especially the NSCN Kaplang faction. The NSCN Kaplang faction, right, it continues to remain active. Reportedly, it has found a safe haven in the dense forests present in Myanmar along the India-Myanmar border. So to tackle the threat posed by these insurgent outfits and militant groups, India-Myanmar carried out a joint operation in 2019 codenamed as Operation Sunrise. Then option D in the question referred to the Vande Bharat mission and Operation Samudra Setu that India executed during the COVID-19 lockdown. The pandemic left a number of Indian nationals stranded in foreign countries because air travel had come to a standstill. So lakhs of Indians around the world, they had been stranded. So to help them out, the Indian Navy ran Operation Samudra Setu. It brought back Indians from Maldives, from Sri Lanka, and as well as from few Gulf countries. Then Vande Bharat mission, it is an ongoing mission under which the MEA and the Ministry of Civil Aviation, they are running special commercial flights through which stranded Indian nationals are being brought back to India, right? Because the pandemic is still an ongoing phenomena. Indians are still finding it difficult to travel between different countries. So to help them out, Vande Bharat mission and Operation Samudra Setu were launched. Next, the 45th question. What does the term D10, recently seen in news, refer to? The correct answer is option C. It refers to a club of 10 democratic countries proposed by Britain. This is Britain's idea. The idea is to create a group of 10 democratic countries. That's why it's called the D10. What is the purpose? The purpose is to create alternative supplies for 5G equipment in order to end the dependency on China. I think in the last two sessions I've mentioned that the global telecom and internet infrastructure is heavily dependent on Chinese manufacturers such as Huawei. But Huawei's equipment comes with security issues. It's a national security threat. So countries like US, countries in Europe, they have already banned the involvement of Huawei networks in their 5G networks. So to create an alternative supplier base, Britain has proposed 10 democratic countries to come together. It of course includes US and India as well. Okay? And it has proposed that this grouping can create the required telecom equipment in order to roll out 5G technology so that we can end our dependency on Huawei and China. So that's why you should be aware of this. It could be a possible prelims question. Next, 46th question. Which country recently authorized the replacement of its currency, the rial, with another basic unit of currency called the toman? The correct answer is option C, Iran. Iran replaced its basic unit of currency and came up with a new currency called as toman. Why? Because the American sanctions against Iran has created hyperinflation. Iran's economy has been completely destroyed because of the sanctions and its economy has come to a standstill. So hyperinflation has eaten away the value of Iranian currency, that is the rial. So it has come out with a new currency known as toman in order to overcome this crisis. Okay, in order to give value to its currency again, it has brought out a new unit of currency known as toman. That's why this topic was in news, and option C, Iran, is the correct answer. Next, the 47th question. Which countries did India reach out to under Mission Sagar? This was yet another humanitarian operation carried out by India. This was again carried out during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under Mission Sagar, India reached out to all the 5 countries that have been mentioned over here. That includes Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar and Comoros. So option D is the right answer. So what did India do under Mission Sagar? It basically supplied essential food items, COVID-19 related medicines such as hydroxychloroquine tablets, Ayurvedic medicine, etc. They were dispatched by Indian naval ships and Indian aircrafts to these 5 friendly island nations in the Indian Ocean. This was again an extension of India's Sagar Doctrine. It was again India's outreach towards the Indian Ocean region during the COVID-19 pandemic. So under this mission, India has supplied these items to Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar and Comoros. Please remember this. Next, 48th question. With which country is India looking to make mutually cooperative use of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Cocos Keeling Islands that are located strategically in the Indian Ocean? The correct answer is option D, Australia. See, India-Australia recently held a virtual summit. I think I've already mentioned this in one of the previous discussions. In June 2020, India-Australia held a virtual summit. During this virtual summit, India-Australia elevated the 2+2 dialogue from the secretary level to the ministerial level. We covered this in the first class. So during this virtual summit itself, a number of other areas of defense and strategic cooperation were also discussed. One of the proposals that came up during the virtual summit was that India-Australia could jointly make use of their strategic facilities located in the Andaman Nicobar Islands of India and the Cocos Keeling Islands of Australia. See, just like India has a strategic island in the form of Andaman Nicobar Islands, Australia also has a strategic island located far away from the mainland Australia that is known as Cocos Keeling Island. Here, Australia has naval facilities. It has a naval base over there. India also has a tri-services command and a major naval base at the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So the proposal that has come up is that India-Australia can exchange these facilities. The Indian Navy can make use of Australian naval facilities at the Cocos Keeling Islands. The Australian Navy can make use of Indian naval facilities at the Andaman Nicobar Islands. Now, this proposal is strategically significant. Why? Because both India and Australia are dealing with the threat posed by Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region. Both India and Australia, they are looking to dominate the IOR region through their naval diplomacy. And more importantly, these two islands are located close to strategic locations. India's Andaman Islands is located close to the Strait of Malacca, which is a strategic choke point. Similarly, Australia's Cocos Keeling Island is located very close to important straits of Indonesia, such as the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait, and the Omboy-Wetter Strait. Where are they located? They are located over here. Okay? Please open your atlas or Google Maps and identify the exact location of the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait, and the Omboy-Wetter Strait. All these geographical locations can be very important because of this proposal that has come up between India and Australia. This agreement has not been finalized yet, but most likely India, Australia will go ahead and they will exchange their naval facilities so that the reach of their navy can be expanded and extended in the IOR region. Fine. So that's why this topic was in news. Moving on to question number 49. What does Operation Juniper refer to? The correct answer is option A. It refers to an operation carried out by the Indian Army which led to the Doklam dispute. See, in 2017, China was reportedly constructing roads in a disputed area known as Doklam. This dispute was not between India and China. The Doklam dispute was essentially between China and Bhutan. Okay? Doklam Plateau is a disputed region between China and Bhutan. But China was reportedly constructing a road at Doklam in 2017, and this would have given China access closer to India's Siliguri corridor, which is India's strategic weakness. It would have brought Chinese forces closer to the Chumbi Valley, which is located near the tri-junction of Sikkim, Bhutan and Tibet. That is at the tri-junction of India, China and Bhutan. And since India has very close foreign relations with Bhutan, and since India is largely responsible for the defense of Bhutan, India executed Operation Juniper with the approval of the Prime Minister in order to preempt the Chinese forces from constructing this road. This is what led to a tense military standoff between India and China. This is what created the Doklam dispute. China was trying to gain a strategic advantage at the Doklam Plateau. It was trying to gain an advantageous position with regard to India's strategic weakness, that is the Siliguri corridor. It was trying to build a road in disputed territory, that is in Bhutanese territory. So to prevent this from happening, India dispatched its army, a team of soldiers were dispatched from India into Bhutan, and they objected to this road construction project. This led to a standoff between the Indian Army and the PLA. There were minor clashes which happened, and this is how the Doklam dispute got triggered in 2017. So the code name for this operation was Operation Juniper. This topic is important because of the ongoing border clashes between India and China. So UPSC might go back and ask a question related to the Doklam dispute. Now coming to the last question for the day, which of the following statements are correct? India has opposed the construction of the Diamar Basha Dam that is being jointly taken up by China and Pakistan. India's opposition is based on the fact that it could cause massive flooding across the line of control. Amongst these given statements, the second statement is incorrect. So option A is the right answer. Let's understand why. See, this map is showing you the location of the controversial Diamar Basha Dam that is being jointly built by Pakistan and China. Pakistan is building this dam with Chinese assistance and Chinese funding. As you can see, the location of the Diamar Basha Dam site is located in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And I'm sure everyone knows that India claims the entire region of Jammu and Kashmir. Right? It is this part of J&K that Pakistan has illegally occupied from India, and we refer to it as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. This is basically the Gilgit-Baltistan region. So in this occupied area, Pakistan is planning to construct a dam. This is essentially Indian territory. India has claimed sovereignty over it, and yet Pakistan is going ahead to construct this controversial dam in Gilgit-Baltistan with the help of China. So this is the reason why India has opposed the project. Basically, this project challenges India's territorial claims and India's sovereignty. We haven't challenged it because of the issue of flooding. The challenge is on the grounds of Indian territory and Indian sovereignty being violated by both Pakistan and China. Okay? This is the same reason why India opposes the Belt and Road Initiative. That is the CPEC component of the Belt and Road Initiative. India is opposed to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor project because it passes through the same route. The CPEC project passes through the same route. That is from the Xinjiang province of China through Pakistan, and it connects with the Gwadar port of Pakistan located over here, which opens to the Arabian Sea. But here it passes through Gilgit-Baltistan, which is essentially Indian territory. That's why India is opposed to CPEC project as well. That's why we have boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative. On the same grounds, India has opposed the construction of this dam. It has triggered a controversy recently, and India has asked China to not get involved in this project. So this is something you should be aware of. Okay? So this essentially concludes our discussion. And on the last slide, I have shared the list of answers as well for your reference. So with this, we have completed our IR module, and we have covered around 50 questions. And through this discussion, we have covered close to 75 plus topics in the last 3 days. Okay? So I hope the session has been useful. Let's hope at least a few questions, few topics come from what we have discussed in your prelims examination. Then before we end the session, let me remind you, for the next 2 days, we will have polity-based current affairs again. Sarmad sir will be back, and he'll be taking 2 more sessions of polity-based current affairs. So please set a reminder for the next 2 days, because at the same time, we will be having polity-based current affairs sessions again. Okay? So this brings our discussion to an end. I hope the session was useful. I hope the IR module is useful for your prelims examination. Please let us know your feedback. Please like the videos, comment on them, share the video with your friends, with your fellow aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So that is it for today. This concludes the discussion. Good night. Thanks for watching.